Hello, you're very welcome along to the Matchbook NFL podcast. Week 4 we have coming up. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey. Delighted to welcome the usual team this year of Sam Farley, Judah, Throw the Damn Ball, and Drew Dinsick. We'll get straight into week 3 takeaways, guys. And Drew, look, I was saying just before we came on air, I wanted to find a way to get Taylor Swift, the biggest story in the NFL so far, into this week's podcast. And I'm delighted you're going to do it for me. And you're basically saying it's fortuitous timing for the NFL. There's some drab primetime games coming up with the Chiefs. And basically, we've got so much to talk about with Taylor Swift in the stands, potentially in some of these games.
Yeah. I mean, if there was high quality football going on right now, if there was lots of interesting stories to talk about, I don't really know if this would be what is kind of leading discussion. I don't know if we'd be breaking into Monday Night Football to talk. Did you guys see yesterday the Chiefs game? I mean, like it's pretty silly, but I think it's a reflection of what we're getting so far, which is preseason quality of play across the league. Some of the teams last week we thought were good. Turns out they may not be that good. And in general, like the offenses are not really performing to the level that we would expect. We've talked about that now a couple weeks in a row, why that might be. But I think if you want to kind of zero it in on a little bit what's going on beyond just defenses being ahead of offense to this point in the season, you're seeing some pretty outstanding defensive lines across the league be just wildly disruptive, particularly interior defensive line. Matchups between, good interior defensive line versus weakish or average, interior offensive line. Combine that with young quarterbacks, combine that with scheme that's maybe a little bit challenging for some of these guys to get through their progressions. And it's in general unraveling some of the quality of offensive play across the league. And I'm sure that's consternating for fantasy players. And if we weren't having successful weeks betting this, I would probably be bellyaching too. Like I'm going to watch football anyway this weekend. I'll probably watch Bills Dolphins twice if we're being honest. But I think I would like to see a little bit higher quality of play as we get deeper into the season. And I guess the fact that other than Aaron Rodgers, with the fact that we have healthy quarterbacks is maybe a knock on wood because I think we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, I know, Sam, you weren't too happy at all with the Taylor Swift coverage on Twitter. So take it away. There was some good traction on your tweet. I enjoyed reading the comments and the replies.
I get why people are interested to a degree, but when you have the NFL sort of posting pictures on Instagram, it was every 4 or 5 pictures was a picture of Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, and you think, was the football that bad that we had to do that? Like I kind of get it if it's a tabloid newspaper, but when you've got kind of established NFL insiders seemingly talking more about a potential relationship that's probably just a PR stunt anyway, rather than actual football, it drove me absolutely wild on Sunday. I was getting so annoyed.
Man, okay, so put Sam in the camp of doesn't believe in true love. Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Judah, do you believe in true love? And tell us a little bit about some of your takeaways from week 3, aside from the Taylor Swift nonsense.
Of course. And I don't think Sam quite understand the pull of the Swifties. Certainly in American culture, it's pretty wild. I mean, look, I would say I have two main takeaways here. Number one, it has to be said, the Dolphins, I think, are. I mean, I feel like I've been beating this drum now every week, but they're here. They're for real. I don't think you score 70 points by accident. What they're doing, I think, as opposed to last year where they were really, really terrific, most of that came from their passing offense. The fact that they're now running on Sunday it was crazy. But the fact that their rushing offense is now paired with this dominant passing attack, I think, is here to stay. And then we should take, we should recognize that. But my main kind of takeaway is I just reiterate what I said kind of last week about there's a ton of parity in the league, and the teams that we think are really, really good on a week-to-week basis, they all have flaws and they can lose to anyone. And I mean, we saw 3 touchdown or more favorites lose outright, including, the Cardinals as, I don't know where it finished, 12.5 point dogs. There's going to be, I think, a lot of this sort of, a lot of these games where we think a team is a heavy, heavy favorite, and it turns out like the teams that we thought were really bad aren't as bad as we thought. And the teams that we thought are really, really good aren't as good as we thought. And I think that's kind of a function of all the things we've been talking about, and that's here to stay.
Okay, yeah, seems to be a fun, more open year this year, at least betting-wise, in terms of who will eventually make the Super Bowl. We talked a lot about NFC versus AFC, so going to be a busy few weeks as the contenders sort of try and get their positions and see who can make the playoffs. So we're going to cover 4 games this week. Falcons at the Jags is the London game, so we are going to cover that. Almost contractually obliged to cover that, I would say. Dolphins at Bills, Ravens at Browns, and the Patriots at the Cowboys. Before we get going, last week, Drew went 5 out of 6, 5-1, and only barely missed out the over. So including the Colts of 4.2. So Drew is a man in form. He's this week's man in form, one to watch. So yeah, do check out all the bets that will be summarized. Insights on Matchbook.com. In bold, anyone's selection that they put up will be there. So insights on Matchbook.com, post recording there. And all we ask is hit that like and subscribe for free, completely free on our YouTube channel. Other than that, we'll get going. We will start with the London game. Falcons at the Jaguars. Sunday 2:30 rather. And we'll take a look at the betting that we currently have on Matchbook.com. You can back the Falcons 2.6 underdogs, the Jags 1.59. The point spread sees Falcons get a 3.5 head start, and the total is 43. So, Sam, over to you on this one. Firstly, you're going to the game, and you try and get to all the London games when you can each year.
Try and get there whenever I can, and especially the Jags. Obviously, I'm a Jags fan purely. Well, there's a number of reasons for that, but we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, I've got to go. I've got to kind of show up. I've got to support the NFL when it's on my doorstep. Really looking forward to the game. It's probably not quite the game that it looked like it might be in the preseason. Certainly, I was expecting two pretty exciting teams. That might not be the case, but there's still going to be a lot of really good players on display, and it's going to be a lot of fun. One of the things I often look for with these games is kind of who's been in the city the longest, because I think obviously that flight kind of really matters. But annoyingly, I couldn't find some really conclusive data about who touched down first, which is kind of annoying because I wanted to use that as like a basis for my bet. But effectively, the Jags, I mean, this will be their 10th game in London. While all those players haven't been there for all 10 of those games, most of them have played at least a game here. The organisation knows it well. They're well drilled with what it takes to come to London and perform well. They have only won 4 of their 9 here. But I think you have to take into account that the franchise was absolutely woeful for the vast majority of that time. Falcons last year in 2021, where they beat the Jets, and that was the day I think Kyle Pitts broke out. Unfortunately, he's got put back again, but that's another story altogether. But for me, I think the Jags 3.5 points. I'm taking that all day long. I'll go a lot higher than that if I can as well. 5.5, 6.5, 7.5. I think they're going to absolutely walk over the Falcons here. Last week, I'm prepared to kind of give that result as a bit of a poor day at the office for the team. But ultimately, kind of the reasons I think they're going to do well here is, one, there's too much talent on that offense to not do well, I would say. But what we've seen from the Falcons is they are pretty damn good on the ground. We've seen Bijan Robinson get more running back rushes. It's gone from 40% of the rushes week 1 to 58.8% of the rushes week 3. So he's getting more and more each week. But the Jags are actually good at stopping the ground game. They've only allowed 84 yards per game on the ground, which means even if they're a bit worse this week, they're still going. The Falcons are still going to need Desmond Ridder to throw the ball, which I think that plays into everybody's hands. He has been woeful. And kind of a question for you guys, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Taylor Heineke, how long until he gets the call up? Because when I watch Ridder play, I don't think it could be long at this point. But yeah, all in all, Jags minus 3.5 to the moon.
Okay, yeah, Judah, maybe answer that question and then speak to us a little bit about last week and try and contextualize and excuse that performance by the Jags last week.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea when Taylor Heineke will be starting. I do agree, though, that would be kind of an upgrade. Yeah, I think the case with Trevor Lawrence is, and the Jags, I mean, the Jags are going to go as Trevor Lawrence goes, is that this is a case of the underlying play has essentially remained the same. I mean, some pretty jarring stats. I thought Trevor Lawrence has had more passes dropped by open receivers. So it's not like a drop where it's like tight coverage and it's kind of like debatable who it's on. Like The Jaguars receivers lead the NFL there in terms of his grading. He's second in PFF grade. You kind of look at the accuracy. A lot of the fundamental play is exactly the same as it was last year. I think he's just kind of getting a bit unlucky. And I mean, it's a Calvin Ridley revenge game. I don't think I need to say more here. I expected this passing offense to get going. As Sam said, they're far too talented. I don't think this Falcons defense, maybe the interior of the D-line can cause some trouble for Trevor Lawrence, but he's also a guy who gets rid of the ball so quickly that I think that can kind of mitigate that matchup advantage the Falcons might have. Their secondary is very, very beatable. And as Sam said, I think this matchup really sets up well. The Jaguars have the second best defensive success rate. Essentially, how are you getting closer to scoring points every run play? And the Jaguars are second best in the NFL at stopping teams on the run. So I just see this as a spot, as Sam said, where the Jaguars kind of jump ahead. They're going to lean on their passing game, which has been, the results are pretty noisy. The fundamentals remain the same. I don't think there's really so much area for concern. The Jaguars are going to have some bonehead mistakes. That's just kind of been the MO for the past couple of years, but we've seen this game before. We know they're a talented offense. I just don't think 3 points is enough. There's really, really such a huge gap in quarterback play, and I don't think the rosters can kind of compensate for that gap.
Okay, quarterback angle for Judah. The Jags minus 5.5. He's going here. So you're going to take Judah. You're going to take minus 5.5. Here's your bet. Okay, minus 5.5. Sam's going for minus 3.5. Drew, over to you. You're not giving up on your Jags. They've become known as your Jags. An off week, and some of the open receivers dropping catches stuff from Judah there. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. I think and even beyond that, like, the EPA per play, people look at, that as sort of an indicator of how quarterback performance is going so far in the season. And I think that's influenced by a couple of fluky plays still in week one, on top of the drops. The fumble that was, in my opinion, not a fumble, but whatever, and recovered and then fumbled again, for a touchdown. Like that's a massive negative EPA play in his portfolio that he's got to live with. And similarly, he's I guess just in general been unlucky. All that said, I think the narrow window that they had of kind of beating the bad teams and getting a couple of lucky wins to get a 1 seed in the AFC, I mean, that ship is sailing. Like, you can't drop games to the Texans where you're a 8-point favorite, whatever they closed, and you can't kind of leave winnable games that were there on the table for you against the Chiefs. You can't let those slip through your fingers and expect to get a 1 seed. And that's really what they needed in order to kind of reach their potential to the good this season. So I'm kind of keeping a close eye on the AFC South numbers. People see performances like last week and, CJ Stroud, everybody seems to be buzzing about him. His offensive rookie of the year number got absolutely annihilated on one good performance, but the Texans are still a pretty incomplete team. And similarly feel like the Tennessee Titans are clearly trending the wrong way. I don't know what they do to turn the ship around. So it's really just, to me, a matter of can the Jaguars kind of keep pace, not let the Colts get away, and kind of clean things up once they get a fully healthy offensive line back, which seems to be a pretty important aspect to kind of unlocking this offense. Because their offensive line is beleaguered right now, and because the Falcons' defensive line has showed to be pretty impressive, particularly David Onyemata, I ultimately didn't play this one, even though I agree with the guys that this is a Jags or pass type of situation. And again, like, I'll be watching the Jags games week in, week out for any sign of life, and presumably they get. If they're in a positive game state here, I think you can pretty much put this one to bed. I don't think that Desmond Ridder is a guy that you're counting on to come back if you're down a touchdown or more in a game. And I think in general, this is a decent spot for the Jaguars offense to flex a little bit through the air. If you can pick on some of the secondary pieces not named AJ Terrell, then I think you're going to find some success here. So Jags get into the high 20s here. Falcons have a difficult time closing the gap, and I think Jags win and cover. And mostly interested to see how that sets up for next week when they welcome the Bills to London.
Yeah, fascinating couple of weeks for the Jags in London there. So Sam locking in Jags -3.5. That's 2.0 currently in the match with betting exchange. That's market best in the UK. And then Jags -5.5 around the 2.2 mark. But watch those markets get a lot more liquid closer to kickoff. We will move to the second game we're going to cover. Probably game of the weekend here. Dolphins at the Bills. Well, not probably, it definitely is. Dolphins underdogs here, 2.36. Bills 1.68. The point spread up to 3 points now. Dolphins getting that head start, and the total is 54. Judah, look, I'm not saying you were first on the Dolphins bandwagon, but you were well and truly on it very early. They've done nothing but being very impressive, and I know the Broncos, some of their defense was a disgrace on Sunday in red zone, but some of the Dolphins' offense looks absolutely insane. And Tua, as long as he stays injury free and healthy, this is definitely a Super Bowl potential team.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the case all along, which is like the futures look is a bit questionable just because if Tua goes down, and obviously he's a concussion away from who knows how long he'll be out. But so long as he's playing and in the short term, we will have that information every week. I mean, this Dolphins offense is as elite as it gets. You know, the Tua Mike McDaniel combo has been the best offense in the NFL now. By my numbers, they've overtaken the Chiefs over the last year and a bit, so long as Tua Tagovailoa is quarterback. And I don't see how that's going to stop, especially when you add in kind of this run game, which is a new element that they did not have last year. I also think this matchup actually sets up really well for the Dolphins, which is in order to beat the Dolphins, I think you're going to need to generate a lot of quick pressure, which is quick pressure like within 2.5 seconds, because Tua Tagovailoa is getting rid of the ball at some astronomically low rate, especially, and he's also getting it like 10 yards downfield. Which is a remarkable combo. But in order to actually slow down this offense and generate pressure, you're going to have to do it quickly. And the Bills have been top 5 in pressure rate over the NFL. But if we kind of switch that to quick pressures, which are pressures within 2.5 seconds, they're actually 4th worst. So a lot of the pressures and a lot of the sacks they're generating are probably on the quarterback and guys who are holding on to the ball for too long. And I don't think that's really going to be relevant in a game against the Dolphins. And their coverage has been terrific. I mean, Teron Johnson's probably the number one corner by some of my rankings, but none of that matters to me. I mean, like the matchup advantage that Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins offense has right now is just so much greater than any defensive capability. They're going to have guys running wide open. I don't think this is a matchup where the Bills are going to be able to stop the Dolphins, and the market I think is pricing in a bit of kind of this Bills defense is good. We should project a little bit of slowing down for the Dolphins, but I just don't see that given the matchup. I mean, look, anything can kind of happen with elite quarterbacks, and I think Josh Allen is every bit an elite quarterback. That I'm not so strong kind of on this Dolphins play, just because we could get a complete Josh Allen dominating game who single-handedly keeps the Bills on there. But I do think this spot favors the Dolphins, and I don't think the market has quite caught up to just how good this Dolphins team is. So I would definitely lean the Dolphins here.
Okay, no official bet from Judah, but he is small lean towards the Miami Dolphins there. Judah's Miami Dolphins has been on the Matchbook NFL podcast for the last 3 weeks, but maybe in a tip in itself that it's only a lean. Drew, you played Buffalo at -2.5 here. A little bit on Josh Allen. Has he sort of come back to that form of a couple of years ago over the last couple of weeks that's allowed you to revise where exactly he's standing at the moment in terms of elite quarterbacks?
Yeah, and I think some of it is just in general, he's played 2 games where he hasn't given away the game. Yeah. And so, it's you forget, how insane Monday Night Football Week 1 was, where it was literally his mistakes that cost the Bills a perfect start to the season. But that said, it does look like he's starting to get comfortable with what the Bills are trying to become in terms of an identity. I didn't know how fast it was going to manifest. The fact that we are here through 3 weeks and, they went up against a Commanders defense that's very good. And they showed you some, a couple of relatively, I thought high points in that game, while ultimately maybe the final score may not be entirely, correct in terms of the distance between those two teams. I thought that the Bills offense performing that well against the Commanders was a good sign. The fact that they took care of business and beat the ever-loving heck out of the Raiders defense was a great sign. And now that they are kind of able to mix in these heavier personnel packages, they've gotten actual production out of Cook, which I kind of was losing hope that they ever were going to get, giving them a little bit of balance, taking a little bit of the pressure off Allen from having to make the hero plays. where he can just kind of mix them in instead of that being his entire identity. I think these are all positive takeaways for the Bills offensively, and I think this Dolphins defense can be had. They're playing man coverage at a way higher rate than I ever would have expected from a Vic Fangio defense. And I think that's a problem against this Bills receiving core, particularly if they're, if you're getting some of the 22 personnel looks in particular with the tight ends matching up against the nickels and the safeties for the Dolphins, who I think can be beat. So I think this sets up pretty well for the Bills to score into the 30s. And then the question is the Bills defense as good as they were last week? Is that what this team is? Personal on paper coming to the season, I had the Bills clearly top 5. I saw enough concern that they weren't able to keep Zach Wilson and the Jets to 0 points that I kind of lost a little bit of faith after 1 week. But what we've seen from them the last 2 weeks, to me, looks like elite defense. And while Judah's points are fair that the pass rush is really leading the way, and a ton of that is coming late as opposed to early, that matters. Like, if you're not getting interior pass rush against Tua, I don't know that you're going to be successful. But at the same time, the coverage that they're getting from some of the secondary pieces who I came into the season with questions about, we were, I think if you put me to, feet to the fire before we had week 1, I would have said, I don't know, really, Khair Elam, you're counting on him to be CB2? You're not even playing. Realistically, Johnson and what was the other guy? Baker. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. What's that? Benford. Thank you. These guys are balling. And the fact that that you can pair them with Tre'Davious White, and that you may have a Dolphins receiving core that may be without or with a limited Jalen Waddle, I think sets up pretty well for the Bills here to do a pretty good impression of what the Patriots did to the Dolphins and keeping them into the mid-20s. And so I don't mind kind of treating the Dolphins, in the same way we treat the Chiefs, where you're asking a question about, am I going to bet against this team? If the answer is yes, it must include, well, they're, the offense that I'm backing can get to 30. I think that's a fair rubric here for the Bills, which is why I was fine laying 2.5. At current market prices, we're kind of approaching either a very juicy 2.5 or a relatively cheap 3. I'm less inclined to lay the points in this game and more inclined to try to look for higher upside future potential here. Josh Allen MVP is probably a buy low at this point. Bills to win the AFC is a buy low at this point, in my opinion. After this particular game here for the Bills, I see a lot of wins on this schedule heading into their bye. I know that we kind of teased it that the Jags next week is a kind of a bad spot for them, but after the Jags, they get the Giants, the Pats, the Bucks, a Bengals team that I have questions about, the Broncos, the Jets, and then the Eagles before their bye week. So there's really only a couple of spots in there where there's any realistic chance that the Bills, are going to go toe to toe with a major competitor. So a win here, I think, tilts the AFC East in their favor, tilts the AFC 1 seed potential in their favor. And just the way that these markets work this early in the season, so many people kind of crowning the Dolphins in every which way after, a really impressive win. That's fine. But if they get beat the next week, there is a lot of kind of market shuffling. Oh, actually, yeah, we thought they were the best, but they got beat by these guys who they're now the best, right? So, there's a realistic chance that the entire futures market just gets completely reshuffled with a Bills win, whereas a Dolphins win, things probably maybe they drift a little, and maybe even at that point it's not enough of a shift because winning at the Bills and getting your most difficult divisional road games in pockets with W's this early in the season certainly sets the Dolphins up for a 1 seed potentially. But I think if I was forced to make a bet on the Bills one way or the other now, I'm probably looking in the futures market considering the current market price for this particular game.
Okay, with the prices change, as Drew alluded to on Matchbook, Bills minus 2.5 is 182, 2.04 minus 3. So take your pick, but no official bet there for Drew. But do have a look at the futures market. If you do potentially see the Bills winning, there could be a bit of shake up there in both the AFC, maybe even the Super Bowl markets outright on the Matchbook betting exchange. Sam, over to you. And again, this is sort of the debate about the minus 2.5, minus 3 on the Bills, but you are looking at to favor the Bills on the point spread here.
Yeah, I am. I definitely like the 2.5 more. Just that extra half a point scares me. And I mean, this could be a shootout. It could be really close going into that final drive. But for me, I've sort of flip-flopped about this game all week long. Kind of woke up Monday morning. Once I'd scrolled through all the Taylor Swift stuff, I was just thinking about this Dolphins performance and how just incredible it was, to be honest with you. I think we almost haven't talked about it enough. It was that good. But then when I was thinking about that, I thought they're going to smash the Bills. And then I've kind of through the week I've thought about it a bit more. I've looked at numbers, and I'm now. I think Drew alluded to it, a bit of kind of recency bias with some of the futures markets. I think I was definitely kind of buying into that earlier this week. And the more I think about it, is whilst I do kind of take on board all of Jonah's points, actually, I think they're really good, but I do wonder if am I just getting too into this Dolphins team too early. So I'm kind of dialing it back a little. I think I'm going to take the Bills minus 2.5 because ultimately I do trust that defense. I think you're right about the kind of speed of pressures, but ultimately this is a team that they're ranked second in defensive DVOA. They've only allowed 13 points in the past 2 weeks, and you've got to caveat by saying that's the Commanders and the Raiders, but still that's impressive whichever way you look at it. And ultimately, the Dolphins, before that incredible game, they beat the Pats by a score. And I'm still not totally sold on who the Pats are this year. They beat the Chargers by 2 points. And I mean, I'm still, God knows what's going on with the Chargers, to be honest. I can't decide between week to week. So I'm still slightly, this is the game I kind of need to, if the Dolphins win this and they win this well, then they're Super Bowl favorite for me by a distance, I'd say. But it's very much kind of need to watch this game and see. And I think this is the first game this season that feels like a really almost season-defining game. And the winner of this, I think, will probably be favorite, if not second favorite, for the Super Bowl by Monday morning. But kind of one thing that I did want to say, kind of looked at some stats about Josh Allen, and this is a guy who, I mean, always a little skeptical about going too far back on player stats against certain teams because there's obviously some of that data doesn't necessarily hold true now. But this is a guy who's 9-1 against the Dolphins, averaged 276.2 passing yards per game, 52.2 rushing yards per game. He just seems to do well against the Dolphins. And how much do you want to read into that? How much do you sort of question that data? I don't know. But either way, it's something to think about. But Bills minus 2.5 for me.
Okay, I'm locked in. The one official bet in this game, Bills minus 2.5, 182 for Sam. He's taken that. And yeah, you're right, Sam. I think it is the first game that feels not playoff type, but not a million miles away from a playoff game. And when you see two really good quarterbacks and a 54 total, you just know you're going to be strapped in for a really, really good game. And it is the official Sky Sports game just picked there this morning, the 6 o'clock game. And on to their 9:25 game, which is also on Sky, which we'll get to at the end. But we'll go to Ravens after the Browns first at 6 o'clock here and take a look at the betting that we currently have on Matchbook.com. So the Ravens are 2.5 point underdogs, 2.3 on the money line, and the total for this is 41. So Drew, back to you on this. Your Colts got it done against the Ravens in overtime. It was the game we were all glued to on Red Zone by the end of it. Talk to us a little bit about your takeaways from that game heading into this Browns, who obviously had a great win last week.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts, I think, did absolutely deserve the cover, but probably didn't deserve the win. And that's fine. They were what, 4.2. That's you need a little luck to get those home sometimes. But the story of the game for me was really just that this Ravens team is dealing with cluster injuries now on the offensive line and in the secondary. I had to look it up because I was like, who in the world are they playing cornerback? What the numbers like didn't really check out. They're like running safeties out there as cornerbacks. And it's like, okay, well, that works, I guess, if you're going up against, skill position groups that aren't like especially fast. Man, dude, if the Ravens were playing the Dolphins this week, my goodness gracious, the speed would absolutely smoke those guys. And the Browns don't exactly have that. Cooper is a fine player, but he's not like especially fast. And I think realistically, this Ravens secondary is absolutely something you have to watch. The defense is good. largely because Roquan Smith is that big of a difference maker, in my opinion, as sort of an anchor of a defense. But the pass rush is weak and the secondary is hurt. Until they get Marlon Humphreys back, I can't in good conscience bet on the Ravens, even as the market is giving you points in a really tight matchup. The offensive line is another kind of somewhat similar concern. No Staley, no Linderbaum. Not sure if either of those guys is realistically likely to come back this week, but a lot of, just a cluster injury where you're missing some pretty important pieces on an offensive line. Like, normally I'm not worried about that because Lamar Jackson has the ability to scramble like no one else in football. But when you have a Browns defensive line that's performing at the level we're seeing, that spells trouble. So really just I want it to be Ravens here, leaning Ravens. Price is right to bet the Ravens, but ultimately passing because of the injury question mark. Similarly, I lean under here, but passed because I'm not exactly sure if the Browns and Deshaun Watson are good now. He looked good, but was that a function of the fact that he was going up against the Judas pass funnel Titans, and just in general those guys were hurt. They couldn't get anything going in terms of pass rush. And I feel like it's possible that if you have a good coach like Stefanski and your passing over expectation is high against the Titans, then your quarterback's going to look good. Like, it kind of made sense to me that was the outcome of that game, as opposed to, well, now this is who he is, and now this is who the Browns offense is, and this is who they are. And I think this game will tell us a lot, where if they are similarly a pass first team, if Watson looks comfortable in the pocket and is picking apart a Ravens secondary that's missing a ton of players, then the rest of the AFC North has a problem. Because the Browns defense is elite, period. Like, top 5 unit was sort of something we were banting about earlier in the season. Top 1, I think, is really where you're at now with these guys, because the strength of that front 7 is so spectacular. So, this is sort of in the same way that you have a bellwether game with Miami and Buffalo in terms of who should be at the top of the pile to win the Super Bowl in the AFC. Certainly, I think this is pretty clearly a bellwether for the Browns offense, where if they come out and they score into the high 20s against the Ravens defense, then they're probably winning the AFC North comfortably. So, huge test for Watson and company. And I think they have the Ravens injuries might just kind of open the door for them to pass that test. So this one's I'll be on the sidelines watching, but it's a big one in terms of sort of the complexion of the AFC playoff picture.
Okay, fascinating matchup here, Sam. And I'm guessing from your selection here that you are a Browns believer. And talk to me a little bit about some of the points there that Drew brought up.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the points Drew brought up, obviously, that this being kind of we spoke about the Dolphins Bills game being defining. This is another kind of defining game. It feels like week 4. We've seen 3 weeks of some mixed play from various teams. It feels like this is the week where I think we're going to really start to crystallize who we believe these teams are and what we think they can achieve this season. But for me, I've taken the Browns minus 2.5, and I've taken under on the points total, under 41. Purely on the Browns defense. Drew, absolutely spot on. They're not top 5, they're top 1. And I don't feel like it's even particularly close right now. Pretty much every metric you can look at has them at that. Defensive DVOA, also worth noting, in that same metric, you have the Ravens are currently ranked 5th. So I think that kind of is what projects this to be a fairly low scoring game. I don't totally buy into the Deshaun Watson sort of not rehabilitation, that's the wrong word, given everything, but his kind of rebirth as a player. I do need to see more evidence of this on the field before I'm kind of happy to say that the old Watson's back. But ultimately, I think this is going to be an attritional one for the purists, I'd say. Maybe not the most exciting offense. It could be lots of kind of rushing, lots of great defense, and ultimately a low-scoring game. I think the Browns will just be able to eke out enough to kind of get them over the line here. But yeah, and the other thing, obviously, you touched on it already, Drew, but injuries. It's very hard to kind of rate this Ravens team when they are missing so many players. It's not really fair to do that in many ways as well. But for me, yeah, Browns. I'm taking the under and the Browns to cover.
Okay, Browns minus 2.5, 188 currently on Matchbook Betting Exchange, and under 41.0, 1.89. And watch those markets right up to kickoff as they get even more liquid, and we are invariably best price on that odds checker grid in the UK. Judah, over to you on this, and you're eventually your selection will be here under 40.5. So just talk to us a little bit of some of the points the guys have raised there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if the Dolphins were my 1A, the Browns defense is really, really good. It's like kind of my 1B that I've been beating for a while now. And I think, as everyone said, they've been historically good, through 3 weeks. And I think part of that is some of the teams they've faced, but also this has every bit of a legit D. The only thing I'd add here, and I'm going to end up on the under 40.5 here, is this game has all of the makings of a slugfest, aside from the fact that these defenses aren't particularly good. The thing that can kind of mess with that is if you have explosive offenses that aren't particularly good, but can sometimes, generate a bunch of big plays. Both of these teams are among the least explosive in the NFL, and have prevented teams from being explosive against them. That's the perfect recipe for the sort of unders. And both these quarterbacks take a ton of sacks. Sacks are drive killers, and especially going up against Mike McDonald's scheme, I think is going to kind of, even though the pass rush of the Ravens is relatively weak on paper, I think we still see plenty of Watson sacks, and the Browns defensive line is ferocious. Lamar Jackson, I think, is a great design runner. He actually takes way too many sacks in kind of these scramble situations, and he obviously has the home run ability too. But I do trust that this Browns D will kind of get to Jackson a bunch, and when you combine the sacks, the lack of explosive elements, and the fact that just they're my top two defenses. I mean, there's a huge gap between the Browns and the Ravens. Not particularly great offenses so far, and this has all of the makings of a game, which, I could float with some alt-unders, 35, 34, 30 even, really getting deep out of the money. I see this as a real slugfest.
Okay, yeah, Drew, come in on a final point there.
Yeah, I feel like if Watson had done what he did last week against a more balanced defense, I would be beating the drum like Browns AFC North by now. Browns, Watson is now all of a sudden in an offense where he's the focus. No more Nick Chubb to worry about. Like pass first. I feel like that is a possible outcome of what you saw last week. But if it had happened against any other team, I'd probably have a lot more confidence in that take. But so I guess that's sort of the test. And maybe I'm not even going to come out conclusively against the Ravens because again, I'll miss all of those pieces in the secondary we're missing. No Marcus Williams, no Humphrey. Like these guys matter, and people are playing out of position. All that matters. So, but there is a lingering take here that Ewing theory, Nick Chubb Ewing theory is potentially what was needed to turn this Browns offense into the Deshaun Watson show.
I will certainly, Drew, you've talked me into it. Be playing some Deshaun Watson alt passing yards and Brown alt spreads, kind of playing that angle. I love that.
Yeah. As a fantasy owner, Deshaun Watson, it was exciting last week. Be interesting to see how that goes, and the Browns in general, and how this game plays out underwise. So there's a lot to take in, and what is a fascinating matchup here we've managed to conclude here. Browns minus 2.5 and under 41 for Sam and Judah. Under 40.5 the official plays, and we'll go to that other Sky game that I touched on, the live game. If you're not a Red Zone fan, Patriots at the Cowboys, and Patriots 3.55 underdogs. The point spread sees them at plus 6.5, and the total is 43. So we'll go to back to you on this one, Sam. You're leaning towards the Cowboys, but look, talk to us a little bit about last week. It's one of the shock results. Well, maybe live in memory, but I just, in terms of the points between the spread and after the actual result it was a complete shock, to be honest.
Yeah, I did. Well, I don't think many people saw that coming. Definitely not to that degree. There's probably some sort of sicko out there in Vegas with a winning slip or something. But just an outrageous result. Kind of watching it with my head in my hands. It was one of my most confident bets last week. I thought the Cowboys would just have too much, even though it was a big spread. But they just couldn't get it together whatsoever. And I look at this game and I'd lean Cowboys, but there's now that kind of residual bit of doubt in my mind that, what if that happens again? Because I don't think it was a fluke. I don't even know if it was a fluke. I'm just so confused by them. But I'd say the handicap here is pretty much bang on the money. I don't think it's going to be far either side. But for me, yeah, this is a game that just has just narratives all over it. I think we're going to see Ezekiel Elliott kind of, how many rushing yards he put up this year? 122 rushing yards. I could see him smashing his season total. He actually looked relatively efficient last week, which is quite a surprise given what we've seen in the past couple of years. But for me, this is one I'm going to sit this out because the Cowboys, I thought they were really good. Now I'm slightly less sure. The Patriots, I've already said it on the show. I have no idea. I've watched them 3 times now, and I still feel none the wiser about what this team really are and what they can achieve this season. So for me, yeah, very much a watching brief, and I'll probably take into account what the other 2 guys say and maybe follow their lead.
Yeah, don't have to have a bet in every game, especially with a lot of questions going into them. And Judah, is going to ultimately be a live play for you. So explain that Cowboys result last week.
Yeah, I think there are a couple I'll start with, I think 7 points is a lot between the Patriots and Cowboys. And that's kind of the base of where I'm starting from and why I'm not betting that. But I will say there are a couple of kind of angles that really have me on the Cowboys here, which is number one, the Cowboys have played a ton of man coverage, and Mac Jones has been absolutely dreadful versus man coverage. I think part of that is his fault, but a part of that is also the Patriots wide receivers are dreadful. And this is something I constantly reference, which is that man coverage. I did a study about this last summer. Man coverage is a reflection of the talent on the field. Good wide receivers beat good quarterbacks beat good wide receivers, and the targets are kind of more predictable. Like if you have a matchup, of Devontae Adams against a bad cornerback, Devontae Adams is going to get the ball. We saw that on Sunday night. And I think this spot really sets up for the Cowboys here. I mean, even after losing Trayvon Diggs, Stephon Gilmore has been quietly very, very good for the Cowboys this year. Deron Bland also has been solid on the outside, and Devontae Parker is the worst separator in the NFL. The guy cannot get open. I mean, it's every year, and I chart the separation, and he is dead last every year. He's missing Kenny Golladay to compete with him, and I just don't see this as a spot by which the New England receivers can generate any separation, and that's a serious issue. Going up against this Cowboys pass rush. Yes, Brown has been terrific as a left tackle, but the rest of the O-line is a bunch of weak links, and the Cowboys have a ton of depth, and I'm not sure anyone can frankly block Micah Parsons. Mac Jones is also the type of quarterback who his traits do not exactly enable him to create outside of kind of the pocket and when he's scrambling. And I think that really kind of magnifies in this matchup. The reason this is a live play for me is if we start to see this game script of the Cowboys are up ahead. We know the Cowboys are good playing from a lead. We've seen them absolutely dominate teams. I could definitely see this as a spot where Mac Jones turns the ball over a bunch. The Cowboys really run up the score. And if we, are seeing a Cowboys 7-10 point lead kind of midway through the third quarter, I would definitely see betting into the alt lines here on a Cowboys blowout, just because I see the kind of matchup and the way these teams play kind of going in that direction. But at the end of the day, 7 points is way, way, way too much between the Cowboys and Patriots. I think that, if we're projecting a median outcome, I still see this as kind of, honestly, a lean towards the Patriots, but not one that I'll be playing.
Yeah, it's the point. 6 and 7 does seem a lot, Drew. And you are leaning Cowboys-wise, but a non-bet again. So, look, talk to us a little bit about your thoughts of last week's result.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind writing that off to looking past their opponents to a degree. I think a lot of... when you're playing as well as you were, and you playing with particularly the defense playing with confidence, and you get a matchup against a team that everybody thinks is actively tanking. The idea that you weren't quite as focused in your preparation that week is not surprising, but that's speculative. I would say the more even watching the game, like in the second half, I was like, Cowboys will figure out a way to win this one. But the offense is kind of stuck in mud. They absolutely, this has been covered ad nauseum because all everyone can do is kind of really dig into the problems with the Cowboys after a loss. And it's fair to point out that their red zone offense is kind of unimpressive. Judah brought up Devontae Adams, like, oh my goodness, could they use a target like that in the red zone? Because the guys they have, they're not really, ideally situated to kind of create space and and make plays once the field gets a little bit shorter. Like, they're best off kind of moving between the 20s, and they're a little bit redundant once you get into the narrower part of the field. And Dak Prescott is obviously operating from a mindset he doesn't want to make the backbreaking mistakes this year that he was criticized so violently, vocally in the offseason. And I think that in general is kind of leading to a little bit of stagnation once you get into the short part of the field. And I think the decision to go get a guy like Brandon Cooks instead of swinging a little harder in the wide receiver market was probably a mistake, because it does feel like they need that guy, like a Devontae Adams type of guy, to really change the complexion of how you defend this team once they get into the red zone. I know Belichick knows that. Belichick's the handicap last week for the Jets ultimately did come down to Bill Belichick versus Zach Wilson under 3. What are we doing? And I think this is somewhat similar, where he's got enough skill position players that if you're going to make a pre-flop bet here, you're looking Patriots only. It's come off a 7 to 6.5. I think that makes sense, that the market feels like this probably should be closer to a 4.5 point dish separation in terms of median expectation here. But I will kind of only other point out, I'm leaning Dallas because of a lot of the reasons that Sam and Judah kind of mentioned. Just this is a team that should bounce back pretty solidly, and with the positive game state, they should run away from this team. However, the Patriots' offensive line, which really kind of handicapped their offense in weeks 1 and weeks 2, is getting healthier. Trent Brown back last week was a huge difference maker. I think even more than Zeke Elliott's efficiency, and maybe he's like in game shape, who knows? But I think a lot of that had to do with just their offensive line finally winning 1v1. And I think that that may not be as likely against a much more talented. Well, I guess actually not even that much more talented, but a more talented group of your front seven than they've been playing the last handful of weeks. But it's, to me, I think this sets up for Dallas to get right, and it probably lands around 7 ultimately. So this was a pass, but Patriots are, I think, a good team that has just maybe one of the most aggressively tough schedules, and for those reasons, they could be like a team that you should power rate as better than average, maybe 1-2 points better than average, but might end up with like 5 wins.
Yeah. It's a no bet from the guys. A couple of interesting live angles and interesting thoughts on both teams, both the Patriots and the Cowboys, who were looking very good before last week's performance. And we'll go to our any other week 4 bets here. Drew, you've got 4, so maybe kick us off here. Run through these as fast as you can. But some interesting shapes, some old favorites of yours. So take it away.
Hey, I'm sticking to my preseason priors, I guess. I'm going to pick on the Rams. I'm going to back the Colts here. This is somewhat of a situational bet on the Colts because I think this is now the Rams' third game out of 4 on the road, and just a dreadful organizational decision to fly home after Monday Night Football in Cincinnati and fly back to Indianapolis on Sunday. So short week, injured offensive line, lots of questions here about the Rams. Excited to hear if anyone disagrees here, but for me, I think selling out to 2.5 is the angle, and I really don't even know who you're going to get at quarterback for the Colts. This is mostly just a bet that you're going to get like a 33rd percentile performance out of the Rams because of the situation. And then I like the Chargers at 6. I guess 5.5 is out there right now. So there's some market resistance here betting the Chargers, which I don't entirely get. I kind of put a line through Jimmy Garoppolo with him in the concussion protocol. It would be pretty wild for him to be available in this game, I think. And I think after the Raiders' performance on Sunday night, you're losing a little bit of confidence in that coach in that locker room. And I'm not exactly sure how you get up and get right for a game against the Chargers team with Brian Hoyer under center, who's, basically a one-dimensional offense. Chargers are starting to figure some things out, particularly their offensive scheme in the absence of Austin Eckler. Like, oh yeah, we should throw the ball 47 times. Correct. Do that again. And I think you win and cover this game pretty comfortably. Minnesota over 46 is in my accounts, largely because I think the Panthers defense is suffering from some pretty important injuries right now. I don't exactly know how they keep Minnesota from scoring 30 here. Minnesota may keep themselves from scoring 30. Obviously, they seem to be a little snake bitten this year, obviously. But I think that their defense can be taken advantage of. Hopeful that Andy Dalton goes, and I would expect this one to move closer to 47, 48. My fair is 48 here, so a pretty decent bet to the over if you can find a 45.5. And then I played Tennessee under at 42. I see it largely in like the 41 range across the board. I think this should be on the other side of 40. Not sold at all that on a short week, you're going to have an explosion of the Cincinnati offense here, even against the Tennessee pass funnels. I think that the D line for Tennessee could be pretty disruptive here against the Bengals team that's pass pro has been miserable. And a quarterback who is wildly immobile in his current state. So Titans, on the other hand, do they score more than 10? If the Bengals give you the same level of effort on defense that we saw in Monday Night Football, I don't think so. And just a decent, I think I'm just going to beat the same drum. Vikings over, Titans under until the overs are consistently over 50 and the unders are consistently under 40.
Yeah, not a bad plan, Drew, to be fair. Colts minus 2.5. Versus the Rams, Vikings and Panthers over 46 at 2.14. Chargers -6, or maybe there's -5.5 there at around 2.02. And then the Bengals at the Titans under 41. Sam, take it away with your 3 picks.
Yep, I'll try and keep these fairly quick and concise. We're going to start with the Vikings -3.5. I just think they're too good to go 0-4. They're not an incredible team, but I do think they are solid. They're far better than I think an 0-3 record would suggest. And I'm really not convinced by what I've seen from the Panthers this season. I've got to say, I think Andy Dalton, probably a bit of an upgrade for them, at least at this sort of early stage in Young's career. But regardless of that, I have to take the Vikings -3.5 here. I think it's just they are too good on offense. They put up too many points to not win this one. Secondly, going for the Chargers. I've got -5 here. As mentioned by Drew, there's a lot of reasons to kind of back them. Obviously, if you don't see Jimmy Garoppolo, which I don't think we will, that's kind of a big thing swinging in the Chargers' favor. But ultimately, didn't think the Raiders' secondary was particularly good in the week. They gave up 228 passing yards to Kenny Pickett. And I think Josh Palmer in that slot role for the Chargers could do really well. So we saw Calvin Austin do well for the Steelers. And yeah, I think even without Mike Williams, I still think there's just too much talent on that offense to kind of, to not win by a decent margin here against the Raiders. And finally, and I truly hate myself for this. I can already hear the laughter. I truly hate myself for this. I'm backing the Denver Broncos to bounce back -3.5 points at the Bears. This is, aside from one of the worst things I've ever done in my life, this is something that I'm basing purely on kind of what I've seen on the offense of the Broncos. Russell Wilson, the last 2 weeks at least, hasn't been dreadful. And when you have two teams of this quality, I think hasn't been dreadful is a low bar, but it's a bar nonetheless. I think they're marginally more functional than the Bears, who I think are, to be honest, an archetype for how you don't run a franchise. And yeah, I think we will see Sean Payton really kind of light a fire under their asses this week and kind of get them going for this one. And yeah, I don't feel good about it, but I've got to take the Broncos -3.5 points in a game I absolutely will not be watching.
Yeah, you feel it's a massive game for Sean Payton, and he's almost his future, the Broncos, at this point. So that's Broncos -3.5, Chargers -5, Vikings -3.5 for Sam. Judah, over to you. One bet, it's the Chargers again. So quick little summary of what the guys have said. It's a full team steam for the Chargers this week.
Oh, I got the Rams. The Rams.
The Rams. Sorry, I thought I read
it. I like hard for me, but I'll try and keep it simple. I want to bet on Matthew Stafford against bad defenses, and I don't think that the Colts defense matches up particularly well. Their cornerbacks are not particularly good, and the market is kind of still pressing in, I think, the Rams 2022 version, and I don't think that is the same team as 2023. The defense, I think, still might struggle, but this offense is far too good. And I think they can really, really put up points against a very weak Colts secondary. I think we're also going to see Anthony Richardson. Actually, some news just broke that he is practicing today. And there is some compelling evidence that quarterbacks struggle the week after coming back from a concussion. Not that I think Anthony Richardson at this point in time is a particularly great quarterback. I see this again as a huge quarterback discrepancy, and I'm happy to take the points because I see Stafford, putting up another 300+ yard game against a very, very weak Colts secondary.
Good news for you is I think I'm 0 for all my Rams bets this season so far, so you're in good shape at the Rams. But we could get pretty aggressively middled here, Polish middle wide open.
Yeah, Rams by 4. If anyone's playing those sort of bets. Best week 4 long shots got off to a great start with Drew this week, or last week, apologies, and exactly same price of 4.3. The Commanders at the Eagles. This would be quite a shock, to be fair, Drew.
It would be.
Hence the
I don't have a ton of reasons here other than I don't think that lasts. So the Commanders got. I'm a sucker when the market does this. I'm a sucker every single time. I will take it every single time. The Commanders got bet pretty aggressively into the close against the Bills last week. They no-showed, particularly scoreboard wise, and then this week the market adjusted the Eagles up despite what performance that was underwhelming against the Bucs, in my opinion, and Commanders down. And so you're telling me that there were very smart handicapping people in the handicapping community who were willing to put their hard-earned money into close on Commanders, and telling you that the market was short on them, and that now that you're getting even more points. So this is just a decent kind of opportunity to buy low on a Commanders team that I think matches up fairly well against the Eagles. I like the Commanders D-line quite a lot. I like them to be able to take away some of the rushing attack that the Eagles have been so successful with and really force this to be a game where Hurts beats them through the air. He may be able to do that, but for whatever reason, the chemistry is just lacking right now between Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. It's just doesn't look like as fluid a passing offense is what we remember from last year. And until it does, I think the Eagles are going to have a difficult time when they take on teams that can stymie their running attack and teams that may be able to generate pressure on Hurts. So I think the Commanders are alive here, and I think the Eagles, if their defensive line might be the key factor here, and just shutting down Howell, and Howell in general is taking way too many sacks, and but the fact that he stayed in and just kept slinging it, and didn't kind of lose his risk-taking mentality in spite of all those turnovers last week, I think is an ultimate positive takeaway, maybe. So Commanders, I think, are alive. I like 8. I like plus 8.5. I bet it. I think they could get a win here, and it would be pretty shocking.
Yeah, 4.3 on the money line if you do fancy it. Not a bad case, Drew, I have to say. We'll go to you, Judah. There's agreement with Texans here, pro Texans, with yourself and Sam in the long shot section. So take away a little bit. Texans minus 5.5 you're going for here at the stadium.
Yeah, I think it's really two angles. The first is CJ Stroud might actually be pretty good. I mean, you don't kind of put up 300 yards by accident in your first 3 games. I don't think that's his average. I think it's 305. I don't think, yes, there's some garbage time involved, but I don't think that happens by accident. Nico Collins and Tank Dell seem like legitimate NFL wide receivers. I would not be surprised if we're talking about CJ Stroud kind of as the middle range, like 12 to 18 type quarterback by season's end. And I think this would be, priced very differently if we kind of built in that projection, and I'm willing to kind of take that risk, especially getting the tails here. And I think it's kind of the same angle I had last week with the Steelers, which is this team shoots themselves in the foot on offense so much just by not forcing coverage mistakes, throwing into tight windows, that I don't think they're going to be able to take advantage of the Texans matchup, especially so long as Deontay Johnson is hurt. I just see this as a spot where the Texans offense can legitimately put up points. I'm happy to take those points, especially because the Steelers offense is not really capable of putting up too many themselves. I'm willing to kind of play that tails angle with CJ Stroud.
Okay, minus 5.5 around the 3.75 mark. And Sam, you like them on the money line, the same bet though, Texans.
Yeah, I'm not quite as brave as Judah there, but for me, I was so impressed by them last weekend. CJ Stroud, I think Drew mentioned it at the start of the show, is now favorite for offensive rookie of the year. He has been absolutely fantastic, 5th most passing yards in the league. And I think one of the things that has really helped him is obviously the 2 receivers. Nico Collins, we saw at the end of last year, he's actually pretty good, even though he's just on a poor team. And then Tank Dell this year. I mean, the numbers don't lie, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, 15 receptions. But it's the eye test where he really pops. This is a guy who just looks the part already. Hugely exciting guy. But out of all of those things, the thing that impressed me most for the Texans against the Jags was actually the kind of depth on the offensive line. They didn't allow a single sack on Stroud, despite the fact they had 2 tackles out, 2 centers out, and a left guard out. That level of depth is incredible in today's NFL, I think. And ultimately, even though I think Laramie Tunsil might be back this week, he is questionable. I just think against the Steelers team, if they can kind of keep Stroud upright, they'll win the game. It's as simple as that. So for me, Texans money line. And to be fair, I'd happily follow Judah, take some points, take some hit on some points as well.
Why not boost the price up? We got a week 4 best bets. The headline from this, Judah, how the Saints didn't get up last week, 17-0 up, is beyond me. A few bets on mine didn't quite get up, a few multiples, parlays, whatever you want to call them, because of the Saints. So I'll let you go first, Judah, and the bounce back here. So variance will inevitably bounce in your way, and you're taking on Drew this week.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Rams money line. I think there's a huge gap in quarterback play. I mean, the Rams are dogs, and I think Matthew Stafford is far better. And I don't think you can make a compelling argument that the rest of the roster of the Colts is so much better to kind of make up that gap. And as I said, with kind of betting this alt line, I want to take Stafford in spots where he can expose teams' secondaries, and I think he will do that this week. I like the Rams a lot.
Okay, seems a common theme this year. Judah and Drew going up against each other. Sam, Chiefs -10 at the Jets. You're laying the points.
Yeah, ultimately, in the words of Taylor Swift herself, when you see Zach Wilson, you say, "I knew you were trouble." The guy is absolutely awful, and this is just a bet against him. He simply isn't an NFL caliber quarterback. I don't want anything to do with him. I'm just going to bet against him almost weekly at this point. Absolutely terrible. The Pats last week had pressure on 61.5% of Jets dropbacks, which I think so much of that is purely because the guy holds on to the ball for what feels like an eternity. Chiefs, not the best defense in the league, but they're solid enough. And I think ultimately with that offense, they're going to be able to blast whatever the Jets can summon up. And it's a real shame because there's so much to like about this Jets team that's just being absolutely ruined by Zach Wilson's play, and hopefully they can shake it off.
Well played. For a man who's no interest in Taylor Swift, he's keeping her in the news here on the Matchbook bet.
I have Google.
Drew, take it away on your best bet, which I thought was a very interesting. I don't know if this is a game I would be betting on myself, so make the case for the Giants.
Yeah, so Monday Night Football, Giants with a nice long rest, because I don't know if you watched Thursday Night Football last week, but the Giants elected to take the bye. So they come off of actual rest where they get to practice and prep. A number of guys who were dealing with injuries didn't play last Thursday, so they should be relatively healthy. I'm circling specifically guys like Andrew Thomas, who I think are difference makers on that offensive line. Saquon Barkley going or not going doesn't really sway me here one way or the other. I think the Giants and Daniel Jones are going up against a pretty bad defense in the Seattle Seahawks at home, and this is a decent get-right spot for the Giants offensively. Seahawks, on the other hand, we have a pretty clear understanding now when you can generate interior pass rush on Geno Smith, he turns into a pumpkin. I think Dexter Lawrence and company can do a tremendous job of generating that interior pressure in this contest. Seahawks quietly dealing with a number of injuries on that offensive line that was already not good to begin with, and I think that can kind of be the distinguishing factor in this game. I'm selling the Giants out to 2.5 at 2.33. I'm going to have some alt spreads too. I think this could be a lot, pretty similar type of outcome to what the Rams did to the Seahawks in week 1. And I'm just not really buying that, the Seahawks can find ways to do enough in pass pro or, have enough game breaking, skill position type of maneuvering here to get into the 20s. So Giants with a healthy win and a healthy cover, reminding everyone that they are not as bad as their 0-3 start.
Okay, final word on the Giants now.
I just want to say one thing. Last week, I think it was Wan'Dale Robinson's first game in all season. Obviously, drafted fairly high last year. He ran eight routes. I think he had 4 or 5 targets. I think this is a guy who looks like they really like him and they see some opportunities to use him in really interesting ways. So I just want to say I think that's a guy to look out for, whether it's in fantasy or on your prop bets, whatever. But yeah, I think that's a really nice bet by Drew.
It'd be
Okay,
a funny.
yeah.
We got a little funny potential for a funny way to close the first quarter of the season. We started with back-to-back primetime games in New York, where it was just a bloodbath on Sunday Night Football, and then an epic, New York comeback story on Monday Night Football, and we're ending with another Sunday night, Monday night New York primetime combo. I didn't even really notice this in the schedule makers, but I think we are due for a bloodbath on Sunday night, and a Giants comeback story on Monday night sounds good to me.
Okay, yeah, fascinating. All the primetime games this year. There's some bad ones coming up, or at least mismatches. That's way of putting it. But thanks for reminding us there, Drew. But prime time in the UK, as we tell everyone, is 6 o'clock and 9:25. So we are done. My thanks to Sam, Judah, Drew. We'll be back next week. Enjoying the pod so far. Thanks for all the feedback on social so far and all the kind messages. We will chat to you next week. Good luck if you're having a bet. Take care. Bye-bye.